Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Before we begin tonight's horrifying upload, I just want to ask, if you're not subscribed, consider hitting that button. Also, like and share this video with friends and family, as it helps to grow the channel, which reaches more people and spreads the truth about these mysterious creatures and their existence. And also, if you have an encounter that you want to get off your conscience and begin healing from the trauma, email me your story and I'll narrate it here on the channel. I'll leave my email in the description of this video. Now, the business is out of the way. Let's get into what you came here for, the encounter. This one comes to us from the state of North Carolina, the very first encounter I've had from that state. I was contacted by a 32-year-old wildlife photographer named Julia. She has a strong passion for documenting elusive creatures and has a love for nature and its mysteries. Grab a drink, get comfy, kill the lights. It's time. Let's get started. Hey everyone, my name is Julia, and I'm 32 years old. I'm a wildlife photographer from Asheville, North Carolina. This all happened back in 2020 during the lockdowns. I planned a week camping trip out in the Pisgah National Forest. I just couldn't stand to be locked inside any longer. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. I'm sure you guys can relate. Anyway, it was just a getaway camping trip, but I thought I would get some beautiful shots of the local wildlife along the way. I was going to be close to the Lake Eden Retreat. That's about as specific as I can get, location-wise. It's a beautiful area, so I was having a field day taking thousands of pictures on my hike in. I found a spot that just felt right to me. It was right next to a serene, isolated lake, surrounded by towering trees and the sounds of nature. It was just what I needed after being inside for months. I set up camp and got everything unpacked and put away, and I just sit for a while staring out over the peaceful waters of the lake. I hadn't seen a single other human being since I arrived. I had the entire area to myself, and I planned on taking full advantage of that fact. I went to bed early that night. I was exhausted from the hike in, carrying tons of gear. The next day I spent most of the time photographing birds, deer, and any other wildlife that graced me with their presence. I get back to my campsite that evening. I had hiked all day looking for photo opportunities. Again, I was tired, so I made a quick meal and sit by the fire until probably 9 or 9:30, and I was out like a light. The next morning, I woke up with a very odd feeling. The previous morning, I was awakened by the birds singing and other morning nature sounds. But this particular morning, something felt very different. I crawled out of my tent to get a fire going so I could have breakfast and some coffee. I had planned on hiking around the lake today, but as I said, this day was different. It didn't even feel like the same place as the day before. It was eerily silent, and there was a dense fog covering the entire area. I felt very uneasy, but shrugged it off and told myself I was being childish. After I had some eggs and some coffee, the fog had cleared mostly, but it was still dead quiet. No birds, no insects, not even a breeze. I gathered my camera equipment, snuffed out the fire, and headed toward the lake. I got about halfway to the water's edge and walked into a muddy, swampy area. I was annoyed that I had gotten covered in mud until I looked down and scanned more closely. I see these very large and very odd tracks. I've never seen these tracks before. They looked like canine tracks, but they were way too big. The depth of the impression also shook me to my core. An animal would have to weigh 200 to 300 pounds to make tracks this deep, even in this mud. At seeing this, I was completely shook, but I decided to continue on with my plans for the day. I did have an air horn and some pepper spray if it came to that, but I was hoping I didn't need it, but I had it just in case. I carried on throughout the day taking pictures of the lake and the surrounding landscapes, but again, I saw no animals at all that day. I've never had that happen before this, and never after this. It was and still is very unnerving. I got back to camp early that evening. I intended on making a bigger campfire that night. Somehow, I felt safer with this idea. False sense of security, I suppose. I still hadn't came across another living soul since I arrived here. I got my fire roaring just before dark and began cooking my dinner. I had gathered as much firewood as I could to keep my fire going as long as possible. Sitting around my huge fire that night, I still felt this feeling of primal fear deep in my gut. I couldn't explain it, and it was making my anxiety skyrocket. I put a bunch of wood on my fire and crawled into my tent with my pepper spray right next to my pillow, along with a flashlight. I finally fell asleep from exhaustion at some point. I was jolted out of a dead sleep by distant howling sounds. I sat straight up in my tent, terrified. They sounded pretty far away, on the far end of the lake, but that did not make me feel a bit safer. I'm out here alone. No one even knows I'm out here, and I haven't seen a single person in 3 days. At this exact moment, I realized the stupidity of this entire trip. I should have at least brought a friend, or at bare minimum I should have told a friend or family member where I was going and when I'd be back. My mind began to race. Is it a coyote? It had to be. We don't have wolves here. It was a very deep, long, guttural howl. It didn't sound like a coyote. It sounded like it was coming from a very large wolf. Needless to say, I didn't get much sleep that night. I just sit in my tent, pepper spray in one hand and flashlight in the other. I didn't want my fire to completely die out, but I was too scared to unzip my tent and go out there. The howling continued for at least an hour. Then, as quickly as it started, it stopped. The good thing was, it didn't seem to get closer to my campsite. If anything, it sounded like it was moving away from me. A huge relief washed over me as I was met with birds singing and the sun breaking the dark sky. Everything was oddly back to normal. The animals had returned, no fog, just a beautiful morning. I decided I would now try to get some sleep, being as I didn't feel that sickly feeling of dread. I slept for a few hours and awoke, probably close to noon. After everything that has happened, I decided this would be my last day out here. I was way too spooked to stay another night. If you take nothing else away from my story, take this. These things, whatever they are out during the pretty sunshiny days too. They don't just come out at night. They don't fit into the typical horror movie cliche. I'm getting nervous now and jumping ahead. Let me back up a bit. I woke up around noon, made some coffee, and decided I'd stay close to camp and take some pics, pack up, and head back to my car. I should have left right then and right there. But me being me, I convinced myself I wasn't in any immediate danger, and I was very curious about what made those tracks and what was doing all the howling the night before. I had the worst idea known to mankind. To this day, I have no idea what I was thinking. I decided to set up some trail cam traps around the area and stay one more night just to see if I could get a glimpse of whatever this animal was. I know, stupid, right? As they say, hindsight is 20/20, and let's be honest. At this point, I wasn't aware of things like this even existing. I was just thinking of local wildlife, in which the biggest animal I may encounter would be a black bear, and I had pepper spray. I was fine, right? Wrong. I was dumb, that's what I was. I set up 3 cameras, one at the side of the tracks, one near the lake where I found a worn game trail, and one outside my campsite. I did my usual evening routine, got firewood, made some food, and settled in for the night. I was nervous and scared, but I kept calming myself down the best I could. It's probably just a coyote, that's what I kept telling myself. At this point it was probably around 5 or 6 p.m., a few hours before dark, when all of a sudden everything goes dead quiet again. I get that feeling again, like I'm being watched, and terror runs through my entire body. Now, at this point, I have realized how stupid this idea was, and I'm ready to go right now. I'm not sleeping out here again. I quickly start packing up my stuff. It's about a 45-minute walk out of here, so if I move fast, I'll be back to my car before it gets dark. I get everything packed up and make sure the fire is completely out. I'm ready to get to walking. Then I realize I forgot about the 3 camera traps I had left out. I use expensive equipment, so I had to, unfortunately, retrieve my cameras before leaving. I grabbed the one near my campsite first and headed for the lake to get the other 2. I get the one that I placed near the tracks, then I head to the game trail to get the last one. As I'm getting the last camera packed up, off to my right, back in the tree line, I hear footsteps and rustling. I freeze in horror, telling myself over and over, it's just a small animal, it's just a small animal, don't panic. I get my pepper spray out of my pocket and begin to scan the area where the sounds came from. It's pretty thick, so I can't really see anything. No sounds, no movement. I hear nothing except the sounds of my own breathing. I slowly start backing up, turn, and head toward my campsite to get my gear. At this time, I'm way past the point of wanting to leave. I gather my stuff and begin making my way toward the trail that leads me out of here, back to my car. Before I hit the trail, I had a strange feeling. Something told me to look behind me, back toward the lake. I turn and start scanning the trees. That's when I see it, clear as day, just watching me, right next to where I just left, where the sounds were. I spot a large, hulking black figure. I'm looking at a monster. I'm looking at an upright walking wolf. I know how crazy this sounds, but I'll describe to you the best I can what I was seeing. It was a dark silverish gray color, long thick hair covering its entire body. It had to be 8 feet tall or maybe more. I was judging the height by the size of the trees down there where it was standing. It had giant pointy ears on top of its head, just like a timber wolf. As I looked closer, I realized this thing had hands like a human. I could see its long skinny fingers dangling off of its grossly oversized hands. Its arms were very long and skinny, and hang down almost to its knees, or hocks, or whatever you would call them. God, I'm shaking just recalling this. It was standing kind of slouched forward. It almost looked like it was ready to fall face first. This thing's its eyes were almost glowing, and it's still sunny outside. I could see a shimmering yellowish glow coming from its eyes. It suddenly drops to all fours and walks over to where I had placed my camera trap. It begins sniffing the air and snaps its head back in my direction and slowly stands back up on 2 legs. The way it stood up still haunts me. Its gaze never left me while it stood up very slowly. I can still see it in my mind. I knew I couldn't run or this thing would chase me down and I would be ripped apart before I even made it to the tree line. I didn't know what to do. I was frozen in place, and I just knew this thing was about to chase me down and kill me. Now this next part literally renewed my faith in God. This thing starts walking in my direction. The way it moved, very fluid, almost like it was gliding through the clearing. Then, out of nowhere, a deer walks out on the game trail behind this thing. I don't know where it came from. God, I think, honestly. But this creature snaps its head in the direction of the deer, which was the opposite direction from me. The deer has the oh no look and turns and bolts into the trees. The creature looks back at me, back towards the trees, then back at me one last time before it tears off into the trees after the deer. I didn't hesitate. I immediately took off running as fast as I could down the trail. I made it back to my car in less than 30 minutes. I never heard anything, never saw anything. That little deer saved my life that day, I have no doubt. If that deer had not stumbled onto the scene, I would have been dead for sure. This thing's face was just evil. It was going to kill me. I could feel it. Pure evil radiated from this creature. I managed to make it to my car safe. To this day, I have a hard time believing all this happened, but it has definitely changed my entire outlook on life. I still do wildlife photos, but I haven't camped since, and I don't plan on doing so anytime soon. Please, if you are in the woods and feel like something isn't right, just pack up and leave. Also, if you're planning a trip, let someone know where you'll be and when to expect you back. It's just the smart thing to do. Hopefully someone can learn something from my foolish mistakes. I was very lucky that day. You may not be. These things you call Dogman, they are real. I saw one. It's something I pray that you nor anyone else has the misfortune of crossing paths with. That's my story, at least every detail I can remember. Thanks for reading this. God bless you all, and stay safe out there. Julia. Well, guys, that's Julia's encounter. Not many people can say a deer saved their life, but I have to agree with her. I think this thing was looking for dinner and decided the deer was probably an easier meal than she was. Thank God for small miracles. I'm glad you're safe, Julia, and thanks for submitting your encounter. I hope my narration did it justice. Well, that's going to do it for now. This one... What is crawling on me, man? Oh my God. Well, a snake just crawled under my chair. That's amazing. Anyway, I hope my narration did your story justice, Julia. That's gonna do it. That's gonna do it for tonight, Pack. Before I get snake bit, I'll keep uploading encounters as I receive them. Until next time, stay safe. Keep your head on a swivel. Watch over your loved ones, and as always, good night.